clear. Go.
As advancements in genetics have continued, the quest for functional intelligent human clones has consumed many cyberpunk governments and corporations within Mike Pondsmith's narrative. In the USA, there was no legislation, nationally or locally, to cover what rights and privileges a wholly artificial clone might have. Many people saw this as a loophole for the creation of functional human beings with no rights, no liberties, and no freedom. The possibilities are endless and sinister. Picture genetically engineered clones as modern slaves laboring at jobs too dangerous or awful for natural humans, but too tricky or delicate for machines. Perhaps armies of identical soldiers born and bred only for war, stripped of emotion and conscience in the labs in which they were created. Black operations operatives, spies and assassins made to order, traceable to no one. Imagine a cyberpunk world where illegal duplicates of a living people made from genetic or biological material pirated from others. These beings would be without serial identification numbers, without pasts or families. If the process was refined, they could be created and disposed of as necessary, quickly, cheaply, and efficiently. There are those within the Cyberpunk 2020 narrative who argue that fully functional human clones are dangerous abominations. In contrast, opponents to this position postulate that clones could be a tremendous force for progress. Imagine clones of long-dead geniuses brought back by the salvaging of genetic material from corpses and biological samples. Bodies and brains could simply be kept in storage, ready to be mated with copies of a template intellect copied into AI storage. Assassination would become useless for the most part. What about the ethical considerations of the potential scientific progress that could be made if clones of the best and brightest that humanity has to offer could undertake missions too harsh for those with families, such as space travel? Medical progress as cloned bodies without intellect could be used for medical experimentations too unrefined for use on normal humans. During the canon timeline leading up to events of the Fourth Corporate War, these arguments were to some extent still moot. As always, there is one outlier who manages to break the rules, and that distinction would belong to Dr. Francis Young. Before exploring the history of Dr. Francis Young, it's worth explaining what cloning means within the context of Cyberpunk 2020 and Mike Pondsmith's world. Stage 1. A cell culture. An amorphous homogeneous group of undifferentiated cells grown from one or more source cells, dependent on an oxygenated nutrient bath for survival. Stage 2. The cloned cells begin to differentiate into several types of tissues, analogous to the early gastrulation of a natural fetus. Stage 3. Morphogenesis, a broad class indicating some morphological organization of the cloned cells. This can mean anything from microscopic organizations similar to gastrulation to the actual growth of full-sized functional bodies. Stage 4 implies neural development, another broad class covering most of the range of neural perceptual development. Stage 4 clones include anything from in vitro specimens with a rudimentary neural net capable of responding only to gross environmental stimulus, to fully functional clones of lower animals not normally considered self-aware. Includes cloned replacement limbs, which are now available. At stage 5, the clones become self-viable, meaning clones can survive unaided in a natural environment outside of the vat or test tube. This includes fully functional clones of non-aware lower animals. The penultimate stage is defined by self-awareness. These are clones with some level of intellect, from basic intelligence all the way up to higher cognition and true reasoning. Stage 7 represents the achievement of perfect human clones. Self-aware, self-viable, and indistinguishable from natural human beings. The timeline of events involving cloning began in 2004, when the first human clone tissue was grown in vitro at Johns Hopkins University by a young PhD candidate named Frances Holliday Young. They were essentially cell cultures, tiny formless blobs of barely differentiated tissue that lived in test tubes for only a few hours before dissolving into necrosis. In 2005, an Italian research team published a paper announcing the pre-morphogenesis of cloned human tissue. In 2006, the first morphogenic human clones were made, essentially stage-free gastrula that died after just a few hours. In 2009, Francis Young quietly left academia for a position with the Biotechnica Corporation, who promised him unlimited funding, resources, and full credit for his achievements in return for patent rights on anything he creates. 2011, the respected biochemist and Nobel laureate Edwin C. Poole published a monograph in which he states that there will never be stage 7 human clones, and this coincided with a large shift in clone research away from academic institutions and into the private sector. 2013, stage 4 clone limbs became perfected, but the techniques can't be used to create self-viable human clones because the drugs used to accelerate growth create non-functional brains. 2014, a team from Nippon Seimei Kogei Associates announced stage 4 human clones with neural development and activity. Shortly afterwards, the scientists complete a cloned body with a full-sized brain, but they were unable to capture it with stage 6 intellect. The body was also amorphous and resided within a vat. In 2016, Nippon Seimei Kogei's clone division were wiped out in a black operation by an unknown party. By 2017, Francis Young had successfully grown 3 full-sized, stage 3 human bodies. The bodies were twisted and imperfect, and relied on drugs to stay alive, but they possessed complete operational brains. Young attempted to imprint intellects into the clones with a new AI braindance process developed by microtech scientist Preem Cyberpunk. The process was partly successful. The clones became self-aware, but their intellects were stunted by their imperfect brains. In 2018, Preem Cyberpunk left Microtech for Biotechnica. Microtech responded and a covert legal battle ensued. Cyberpunk was assassinated, presumably by Microtech agents, but his protege, Morro Kelly, stayed with Biotechnica. In an unrelated tragedy, Francis Young's 20-year-old daughter, Emilia, was killed in a traffic accident. The death of his daughter gave Francis new impetus, and by 2019, Francis Young had finally grown a perfect human body, cloned from samples taken from his daughter while she was still alive. The clone achieved full maturation within 10 months and physically looked identical to Emilia. After a period of intensive work, Francis Young and Morro Kelly devised a groundbreaking experiment that implanted a construct personality into the cloned body, using a combination of cybernetic and organic technology to hold the implant in the blank brain. The clone became self-aware and was now named Edgerunner. Edgerunner was the first fully functional, self-aware, self-viable human clone in human history. As a functional Stage 7 clone, Edgerunner represents the pinnacle of biological and cybernetic technology in Cyberpunk 2020. Not only is she described as a wonder of biochemical engineering, but her brain is an unprecedented revolutionary fusion of organic tissue and biochipping. Contained in her unusual brain are a prodigious intellect and aptitude for learning, as well as the complete documentation on her own creation. Edgerunner would also become pivotal in what I consider to be the best campaign in Cyberpunk 2020, The Land of the Free, written by William Moss and also involving Lisa Pondsmith. I had many fond memories playing this with friends back in the day. It also introduced Haruko Kanawa, a ruthless solo and corporate ninja who was one of my favourite characters from the pen and paper game. She reminds me of someone. In terms of the canon timeline, Edgerunner's fate remains unknown. Her presence is pertinent though, because it indicates that fully functional cloning was now a viable technology to effectively bring characters back from the dead. In the canon timeline, Johnny Silverhand released the album Clone Wars, with music focusing upon Biotechnica and the idea of bioengineered humans being created for military and industrial purposes. This album was a response to an unsuccessful assassination attempt on Johnny Silverhand. In a non-canon timeline, this assassination was partly successful. Johnny Silverhand's body was torn in half by an improvised explosive device that targeted his AV-7. Johnny Silverhand lay near death in a cryogenic tank for nearly a month before his location was found by the ghost of Alt Cunningham. In this timeline, Alt had cloned herself a new body, the Alt-2 Cunningham. Alt offered to upload Johnny's ghost to the net, then download him into a new cloned body. Johnny Silverhand agreed. 8 months later, Johnny Silverhand appeared at a press conference to release the delayed Clone Wars album. In 2026, Johnny Silverhand began working on a new album, Tomorrow's Child, which aimed to expose the government for its inhumane treatment of children infected by carbon death plague. In retaliation, the American government had Johnny Silverhand assassinated. Alt Cunningham steps in and creates a clone from the frozen tissues and ghosts of the original Johnny Silverhand. Unfortunately, as it was the original Johnny Silverhand, he had a 7-year memory gap. Alt this time told Johnny Silverhand the truth, that he was a 3rd-generation copy, and if he so wishes was practically immortal. The importance of this lore is that in the Cyberpunk 2077 narrative, there exists several plausible methods to explain why characters such as Johnny Silverhand might still be around, despite the significant time lapse between 2020, Red, and 2077. Alternatively, Mike Pondsmith has confirmed that if you have enough money and the right cyberware, the average lifespan of a human increased to around 130 years. Other considerations at this moment in time include the possibility that cloning technology may have become more advanced during the interlude to Cyberpunk 2077. Alternatively, Edgerunner and the work of Dr. Francis Young may have been lost during the Fourth Corporate War. It will be interesting to see how or if Cyberpunk Red will address the issue of cloning. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If Johnny Silverhand were to return in Cyberpunk 2077, would you prefer it to be a clone or the original Silverhand, perhaps past his prime? Hey Chumba, I am Kazuliski, and I hope you found this Cyberpunk 2077 discussion on clones to be informative. Are you interested in more Cyberpunk 2077 content? Then be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you for chipping in.